Hello, my name is Charlie Waite, and I'm a landscape photographer. And we're going to talk about a number of really, really important things. And one of them is what we're looking at. And I think that's really important. What actually are we intending to make a photograph of? Then we're going to have a little bit of discussion about the camera equipment, which I think is extremely important. And I'm very, very keen to encourage young people to photograph. So there's a lot to discuss. My first entry into photography came in a rather interesting way. I was in the theatre for about 10 or 12 years, and one of the things I noticed, which I think was possibly really responsible for my photography becoming landscape photography, was the lighting. Light is absolutely critical. You can encourage anybody to look anywhere courtesy of lighting. And I think the landscape photography, for many people, is hugely, hugely rewarding. And I think landscape, to look at and to photograph, is absolutely imperative that we do it more and more. We have to have a commune, if you like, a communion with nature. And nature, it plays a very big role in all of our lives, or if it doesn't, it should. Many people ask me the standard question, which is asked of many photographers, which is, what camera do you use? There are some people who say it doesn't matter about the camera, it's this that matters. But I'm afraid to say it does matter about the camera. It's not going to be the thing that sees the image or pre-visualizes it, but it will ensure that you produce a photograph that matches your pre-visualization. And that's really important. But when it comes to me, I'm going to talk about my old faithful here, a Hasselblad 500C. Essentially, it's a box, and it's a 6x6 centimeter. This was made pretty much, not this particular one, but they began to be manufactured in 1957. Now, rather fascinatingly, nearly 60 years later, a CFV II 50C digital back came out in around 2020. The most extraordinary thing is that the digital back that appeared all those years later fits onto this camera like that, sweetly. It's exactly the same size. It's exactly the same feel. It's as nostalgic for people who've used Hasselblads for a long time, but it's a digital back. And that is what makes it special. So that's my camera. I've got about 5 lenses. I have a 150 here, I've got a 40, I've got a 50, an 80, just standard lens, and then this 150 and a 250. The important thing is to never be frustrated because you can't make the image you want to make because you didn't have the right lens. The lenses play a very, very important role as much as the camera does. There are a lot of cameras out there on the market, and just make sure that you find one that you get along with and that feels right. And this Hasselblad feels right for me. When it comes to additional pieces of equipment, one of the things that I think is probably most important to always have is the polarizing filter. Why do we have a polarizing filter? Because the polarizing filter removes white light reflection from various surfaces. Now, you probably may see I've got a little bit of a gleam, if you like, on one side of my head because I don't happen to have much hair. And the polarizing filter will remove that, but it'll also darken the blue sky, it'll increase contrast, and it's what they call light hungry. Very light hungry. 2 stops when fully polarized, 1 2/3 stops when not. And remember, it is quite fierce. So do a little check before you put it on, find out whether it's having an effect on something, and then make sure that you're content with the effect that the polarizing filter is having. And this is a graduated filter, which I think you hopefully can see. So it's used sometimes to darken the sky, or in the Caribbean, to darken the beach. Many will do it on the computer, many, but I prefer to do it in camera, actually there when I'm making the image. Did you hear the word making? Because a photograph is not just a photo. It's a multi-dimensional production. It's very, very important to be aware of every single element that is within the photograph. You cannot admit to not noticing something. You're a noticer. That's what landscape photography is all about. You notice and you produce a photograph that is in keeping with what you saw and what you felt. Now, many people will say, don't photograph what it looks like, photograph what it feels like. That's a lovely expression. I think it's probably time to look at some of the photographs that I've made over the years. It's always rather good to revisit some of the images that one's made, partly because you sort of have a love affair, if you like, with some of the photographs. And it's always nice to come back to them because it reminds you of how you felt on that day. With this one here, actually, my mother was sitting in the car waiting for me, and she came with me on a lot of tours. And looking at this photograph, one of the things that I find especially pleasing is the fact that with a ladder, which is only 2 or 3 steps, I was able to just get high enough to be able to provide a little bit of space between the top of the reeds and the reeds at the back of the water. Ladders are not always the thing that you need to have, but you do need to have very, very astute vision. The two-dimensional nature of photography is the one thing that can cause you problems. You need to try with landscape to have depth. And the way you have depth is reveal more than conceal. Give the viewer as much as you can. Offer them all that you enjoyed and that you just fed on. And so that when that viewer, your audience, sees that image, you need them to feel that when you made that image, they were standing absolutely right next to you. That's the key. So this image is made in a place called Rydalwater in the Lake District, and I rather like this sort of S shape that it makes, if you like. So you start at the beginning of the photograph and then you travel in a series of Zs right up to the top of the sky, at which point you depart. So you've familiarized yourself with every single part of the photograph, and it's sharp from front to back. And that can be very pleasing sometimes. So that's one of my particular favorites, Rydalwater in the Lake District. Continuing on looking at photographs, these appear in a book of mine called Behind the Photograph. The reason it was called that is because an enormous amount, in my opinion, takes place before you make the image. It was said of the great American photographer Ansel Adams, he was able to convert geographic reality to transcendent emotional experience. So that is all about how do people react to the photograph? How do they feel? And the image that I'd like you to look at is one of some hay bales. I had no idea that the clouds that were coming from the right-hand side of the photograph would keep their structure in the way that they did until they delivered themselves precisely above the bales. I mean, that was just too wonderful for words. And then I realized that I didn't have my ladder with me, because the belly of the first cloud was being, in a way, spoiled by the top of the first bale. So I had to rush back, get my ladder, and I came back, and I just managed to get the top of that first bale just underneath the belly of that first cloud. And the clouds replicated the bales, hay bales, in a way I could never have dreamed of. And this image remains in my head and in my heart for very, very many years, I hope, to come. Sometimes one finds oneself in a foreign country, and there's a very strong urge to photograph absolutely everything. But remember the discipline you have to apply. You have to really look at what you're about to make a photograph of. And I remember looking at this little scene, and there was no light at all. There was no sunlight. It was all grey. But I looked up, and behind me, there was a cloud that was just gradually moving, and I knew that in a short while there was a chance of the light sweeping slowly across the landscape, but not on the far distant hill. That's the most important thing. I wanted to present my little tree and my hills and my geometric shapes in such a way that the background set them off, if you like, and offered to the viewer this little scene. And as I often think that the clouds that are not in your photograph are more useful or as useful as the ones that are. Clouds deliver shadows. You need to make friends with your clouds. Look up. and work out what you want subdued in your landscape and what you want to highlight in your landscape. Use your clouds as your friends. But what is important about this photograph is the little tree's shadow. That is the sort of piece, if you like, within the image, the little area that just says, look at me, aren't I fun? And the other thing that I like are the two parallel lines made in the landscape, and then a diagonal hedge that goes straight across. And when I look at this image, we started talking about theatrical lighting in the theatre, and this is a perfect example of lighting that plays a very, very pivotal role to the construction of this photograph. There are three very important things behind making a photograph. One is you need to know how to operate your camera. Don't be daunted by it. The second really important thing is general confidence. Remember, the eye and the brain are a great double act. And you just have to say to yourself as you're looking out at your landscape, is this impossible to resist? And if it is, then give everything of yourself into its production. This image has to be achieved. You cannot afford to let it go. And when we landscape photographers get involved, we need to own the experience. We need to own it in our head and in our heart. And I think the third thing is preparation. Decide where you're going to go. Discover where you're going to go. Research where you're going to go. But it is absolutely true that sometimes we get lucky. People say sometimes chance favors the prepared mind. So have a 360-degree visual astuteness, if you like, because somewhere there is a landscape that is waiting for you to embrace. In 2006, I had an idea to start Landscape Photographer of the Year. Here is one of the books from the competition. The wonderful thing about Landscape Photographer of the Year is that it celebrates the beauty and wonder and amazing nature of the landscape of the United Kingdom. You can enter very easily. Just go to www.landscapephotographeroftheyear.co.uk and you'll find categories there available for you. It's a wonderful competition, and as I say, it really does celebrate our beautiful, beautiful landscape. So it remains for me to say much gratitude to you all for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe to MPB's YouTube channel. If you would like to look at some of my work, then have a look at charliewaite.com. And if you'd like to look at some of my work on Instagram, it's Charlie_Waite. So thank you once again for watching.